Hi, I'm Maria Fernandez. I'm the executive director to Adelante, and today you are joining me for our Mujeres por Mujeres podcast for Adelante. So, I wanted to talk about misinformation and disinformation that's floating out there right now during this current election season, along with the current slate of candidates that are running for various positions with the City Council, the Sunnyside School Board, the Port of Sunnyside as well. All of this misinformation and disinformation is an aim to frustrate voters and to get them to vote to keep the same people in positions of leadership in the city council, the school board, and the port district. So there's just a lot of chatter going on, most of it, again, aiming to just frustrate voters because we know how voters behave when it becomes very dramatic and tumultuous, especially online. People get very discouraged. They want to disengage with the electoral system. And what we're here to do is we're here to hopefully help to bring some focus around what's important in this current election. Most people have the presidential elections on their radar every 4 years because it's an important election year because we're talking about the president of the United States, right? But what gets really lost in elections is the importance of local elections. And this year, we have our local elections occurring right now, with November 4th being the deadline date for getting your ballots in. And I can't stress enough just how important our local elections are because they have so much of a direct impact on your daily lives. And what we like to do here with A Adelante is to really demystify what that looks like in everyday practical life. Okay. And what we can see in Sunnyside, because there is such a lack of leadership in public office at the city level, the school level, the port level, the county level, what we see is an area that is really affected by poor leadership, and you can see it. You can visibly see it in Sunnyside and in the Lower Valley, especially when we're talking about low wage jobs, talking about jobs that so many of them don't have access to, even the most basic of benefits like access to healthcare, um, time off for family. Most people have to have two or three jobs just to pay the rent, put food on the table for their kids. When we're talking about the local elections, we are talking about um, we're talking about decision making and policy making that directly impacts you every single day. Okay, we've kicked off a different podcast to talk about port and just how important that was. We want to talk about also the city, and we want to talk about the school board. But first, before we talk about those really important elections, we have to talk about all of the misinformation and disinformation out there. So much of it in regards to the current slate of candidates. Many of them are part of our emerging leaders classes. And let me be very clear about our emerging leaders classes. Our emerging leaders classes are about just preparing people for governance. Okay. And the way that we prepare people for governance is to help them understand what that looks like when you're elected as a city council person or a school board member, or for the port district. Like, what does governance actually look like? We talk about budgets, we talk about policy making, we talk about policy implementation, we talk about how to represent community. More than anything, our biggest driver for our emerging leaders classes is teaching emerging leaders about how to best represent the community that are your constituents. They are your residents. They are the people that vote you into that trusted leadership position. And so, and more specifically for us, we talk about leadership from a BIPOC lens, from the lens of a community that is accustomed to seeing oppression, racism, discrimination, and really how to address that systemically in all jurisdictions, whether that is a port district, a school board, a school district, or a city jurisdiction. And so the chatter around these candidates or the slate of folks that are running for public office is just, it's overwhelming for a lot of the community members. And it's hard to see the bigger picture, the message that each of these folks is trying to convey to community. We know for certain that these emerging leaders or these candidates absolutely have the best interests of the community at hand. They're there because they want to serve community. They all bring a wide range of expertise and experience to the table, but all of it to use for the betterment of the community that will vote to represent them. So the important thing to really try to get through all of the noise that's being made by the same folks who have everything to continue to gain from by keeping it exactly the way it is. What you all have to remember is that the emerging leaders, the slate of candidates that are out there running to represent you, really truly do have the best of intentions for the community. They really are there to serve at the bequest of community, not industries, not political relationships that they may have, not because they have some sort of political ambitions to use their win for a bigger platform later on. That is not at all the aim. So, I think that there's a few things that everyone can agree on here in Sunnyside, and that is that um, what everybody can agree on is that Sunnyside has tremendous potential, tremendous potential. Um, and I think that we can all agree on that there is a true need for change in Sunnyside, and not just Sunnyside, all throughout the Lower Valley. There isn't a person that we've talked to that does not agree that change has to happen here. Because when you're talking to just, folks, regular folks out here, they're conveying to you that there's a struggle, right? Whether it's because they're living with a contaminated well, whether it's because they can't seem to find a job that will be consistent, or they're having to work two or three jobs just to pay the rent or to pay for food, or maybe they've had issues in dealing with the school administration. Something is adversely happening in their life, and it's really prevalent here in Sunnyside. And so everyone can agree that change has to happen here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is the general consensus about Sunnyside, that there's potential, but there also needs to be change. Well, you can't bring about change with the same leadership. You just can't. There's a quote by Albert Einstein that goes, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results." You cannot expect to have the same leadership and expect to see the kind of change that Sunnyside needs to see to improve the quality of life for residents, for families, for workers. We need new change with new vision, with new leadership. So we can see that even just watching the issues play out at the city level. That's a prime example of this. New leadership was brought in to steward cleanup and to bring positive change to the city. But the old guard, most of whom are running to keep their seats or trying to win a new seat, as is the case with Tom Dolan, who works very closely with Teresa Hancock and Vicky Ripley, and are very much responsible for putting an abrupt stop to the positive change, the positive things that were happening with new funding, infrastructure expense, costs being brought down because of the new manager, because of what the new manager was doing, Mike Gonzalez. So these are the old guard. These are the folks that don't want to see change because in one way or another, they benefit from keeping things exactly as they are in Sunnyside. Okay. The same could be said for the school board. If you want to see improvements with the school board, you have to vote in new leadership. Most of these folks have proven over and over again that they have not been able to elevate Sunnyside, to improve the outcomes for residents, for families, for students, and for workers. We can go one by one. Most workers here have to work at least two jobs to make ends meet. Most do not have access to health care or other benefits. Many work in very dangerous working conditions. And going on from there, the vast majority of our students have not been able to meet even the minimum standards for state testing. Most are being graduated out of the school system just to get them out and very unprepared for life after high school. We lack youth programming while we have like a community center just sitting there empty most days, not in use with our youth. We do not see a city prepared to deal with heavy layoffs of workers, with businesses that shut down. And we gave an example in the last podcast where we were talking about the closure of the dairies. 170 people were laid off, and the city, the port, the county was not prepared to deal with that shutdown and provide the resources necessary to get these laid off workers back on track with new employment. So, not even so much as a resource fair to facilitate a meet and greet with prospective employers for laid off workers. We do not see an active and effective workforce training program in Sunnyside to help facilitate new skills for new jobs. The housing availability is not developing at a rate that can keep up with the growing population of our lower valley. We lack infrastructure development like bike paths, like green spaces, healthy tree lines, sidewalks, more gathering spaces, and my goodness, an art and music culture. Where is that? We recently have taken several trips to various cities to look at what their infrastructure looks like, what kind of art and culture scene that they have. And we see so much out there in other cities, small and large, that could easily be brought to Sunnyside, and not even a whiff of an attempt by the current leadership to bring any of that here to Sunnyside. None of it, even something as simple as art and music. We have so much potential here, and it is completely being overlooked because the old guard continues to be voted in, leaving most residents to struggle with the day to day. Those are just the facts, y'all. If you start looking at who has been serving in city council, sometimes for more than 10 years, and yet, behind closed doors in most of our families' gathering spaces, we're talking about how little is offered here. And, I will continue to sound like a broken record because I truly, truly believe that while the old guard, the old leadership continues to blame family and children for what's wrong with community or what's wrong with our cities, it's really that leadership that really needs to bear the brunt of the blame, because again, we're talking about setting up the conditions that breed these issues, right? When we're talking about everything that the city deals with, whether it's poverty, whether it's crime, whether it's delinquency, you name it, it all has to do with the leadership here. So, what do we need? We need new, competent, innovative, creative, community rooted leadership. So AI Adelante trains emerging leaders to serve the community. Nobody and nothing else except community. So think about why people will slander and defame our name. What do they have to gain or preserve by doing that? So we bring in our own resources with various foundations, and we're so grateful for the partnerships that we have with the funders that support our work. We invest those dollars in Sunnyside and Yakima County. The big wins we have had in our lower valley have been big wins for residents, whether it's the election change for the school district, the documentary we're producing sharing family stories about the impact that the environment has on their lives, training new leaders for public office because they actually care about people, or even elevating the consciousness of residents to think more broadly about their engagement in the city. The work that we do is about benefiting the residents, the community. And when people have take issue with AI Adelante, it is because we're not focused on respectability politics or shaking the hands of people that we know are in it for their own personal gains or for the gains of an industry or the businesses that they align with. We're in it specifically and only for community. Um, and we're here to collaborate with people and orgs that want positive change for everyone. But we also won't sit on the sideline without an opinion when we see exploitation, abuses, manipulations, lies, and negligence from those that have consistently throughout the decades have been the loudest, and those that sit in those positions of power serving their own interests or those of their political and industry partners. We're a strong organization of Chicanas. That's that's all there is to it. We're a very strong organization of Chicanas that believes very firmly in making sure that the people know that they have power to change everything here. Our dirty, contaminated environment, the low paying jobs, the lack of industry diversification, the poor training and preparation of our students, the violence, the corruption, the lack of workforce development. The people have the power to change all of this. And we are here to help facilitate that. But we need you to get out and vote. Your vote holds so much power, but we need to exercise that power. We need you to get out and get your ballots in and get it into a red ballot box. Don't give it over to people whose intentions are to ensure that your vote is not counted. And that is happening right now when people show up at your door asking you for your ballot. Please don't just readily trust anybody that goes to your door asking you for your ballot. And if you hand it over, there's a huge chance that ballot may be tampered with or may end up going into the garbage can. So please don't readily trust anybody that's there to try and gain your ballot and take it from you. Put it in the red box yourself. So, again, I'm going to encourage you all to one, just look past all the noise of social media and those that want to slander and defame the current slate of candidates that really, truly are here to serve you, ultimately, truly here to serve you, or the defaming and the slander of Ella Adelante, because our only goal really is to facilitate change for community. And that may not be, a popular topic for a lot of people because, you know, it's just something that we deal with, that strong voices are often very much criticized, and we certainly are not above reproach ourselves. We absolutely want to hear what people's feedback is, and we always want to consider what the community has to say about our presence in our communities here. Ultimately, the decisions we make is because of urgency. There's an urgency for the kind of change that we're asking to see in our communities. Those of you who um, maybe do other lines of work, as opposed to like maybe our farm workers or us who has constant contact with our farm working community, um, maybe you're not seeing it as prevalently, maybe you are, but we get to have a lot of exposure with people who are truly, truly being harmed in many different ways, in their work environments, and many, many families who, even not so much in their work environments, but even just at their homes, are dealing with really, really harsh issues like contamination of their water wells and not having access to clean potable water. These are very serious issues. We get approached very often by workers who are dealing with exposures to very harsh and dangerous chemicals. And there's very, very little remedy for people, for a lot of people, for various reasons. Maybe it's immigration status, maybe there's fear of losing a job because it's their only employment. But so we exist here as an advocacy organization because somebody needs to advocate for people. Somebody has to be able to step up and say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. And that can be construed or viewed as something that isn't going to be as popular for people because in our culture we're taught to essentially just you know um, what is the old saying, calladita se ve más bonita. And that's not us. That is not us. We're not going to sit quietly just so that we can appease people and so people don't feel uncomfortable. I think that it's way past time to start feeling uncomfortable around these discussions that are so urgent. Ella Adelante doesn't exist here just to have aggressive conversations. We're here to address the issues, real issues. And we would be here for any one person that we felt was being exploited or abused in some way because we are an advocacy organization. And who knows, maybe one of these days, those that have opposed us thus far will end up having to give us a call because we are one of the very few organizations that actually has the courage to stand up and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done because we are an advocacy organization. And we're very, very proud of that. We are very strong Chicanas, Latinas, Mexicanas, and we carry that with so much pride because we love our culture, we love our gente, we love our community, we love our families, and we do this work because we love so much, even if it does make people uncomfortable. Ultimately, the goal is to bring equity and justice to our communities, to see healthy, thriving communities. We've got to be done seeing our community as constantly struggling, both in employment, in quality of life, in our environment, not being able to breathe, not being able to have access to clean water. Like, those days have to be done. We have to keep addressing the issues, no matter how uncomfortable. No matter how uncomfortable it becomes for people, we have to continue to address the issues. And so, the one thing that you can count on with Ea Adelante is that we aren't afraid to address the issues. I'm more than happy to address the issues when other people are too uncomfortable to do that. So, what we ask you all is that you please support the work that we do, because ultimately the work we do benefits our people, okay, and our community. And so, please get out there and vote, 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 vote. Your families depend on that. Our community depends on that. Our public health depends on that. Our potential depends on that. Voting is critical right now. If you want to see power in the hands of the community, please vote, but vote informed. Okay? Vote informed and vote for emerging leaders that have your back. Thank you so much for joining me with this podcast. I will see you the next time with the next one.